What is up? It's the Pro Football Focus Fantasy Podcast. My name is Jeff Ratcliffe, and it's Friday, May 15th. Man, May is moving fast. Every day is freaking Groundhog's Day, so I guess it doesn't surprise me the time is going rapidly. It's weird. The quarantine is going fast, but yet it feels like it's been here forever. I don't know. Space-time continuum stuff right there. But anyway, on the show today, we are going to talk some tight ends. 3 for 32. Get excited. Not necessarily. If you listen to me for a while, you know I'm not the biggest fan of tight ends for fantasy purposes, just given the 3 for 32 scenario. And if you're not familiar with 3 for 32, here's what that means. It's when a tight end catches 3 balls for 32 yards. Close to that number happens very frequently. 3 for 29, 3 for 37. I mean, it's very common for tight ends to be in that range. The problem with fantasy scoring is, all right, so if let's say you have 3 for 32. You now have 6.2 PPR points. But if you have 3 for 32 and a touchdown, you have 12.2 fantasy points, almost doubling what the player who didn't score the touchdown produced. That is not, to me, that's not a good thing, because the touchdown could be very random for the 3 for 32 guy, and that player was not twice as good as the player who didn't score a touchdown. So really, the scoring system's broke, is what it is. I know if you're a longtime listener, you've heard me say that before, but for all of the new listeners, there you go. That's what 3 for 32 means. But I want to continue on with the strength of schedule stuff that we've been talking about all week long. Did the final piece in the puzzle here, tight ends, over at PFF.com today. And, of course, using current rosters. And really, the key for tight end production really boils down to, in most instances, it's the safety. But there are some teams who will use a linebacker in coverage on a tight end. Every so often, you might get a corner. If it's if you have a team who's willing to put a corner on a Kelce, that type. Teams did it sometimes with Gronk as well, but it's pretty rare. So mostly it's the safeties and linebackers who are covering the tight ends. So we really don't care what the corners grade out in coverage in that instance. So anyway, using that information, and yet again, I have to make sure to preface this. The difference between the best and worst schedules at tight end is not very significant. In fact, there's a 7.5% difference. So the best schedule is just 7.5% better than the worst schedule. The translation there, it's not as vast. Now, over the course of the season, that's a 7.5% difference. But, week in, week out, yeah, so you're going to see that variance much more drastic within the context of the season. So that's something to keep in mind. But generally speaking, we really shouldn't be using strength of schedule to move the needle dramatically. It's only going to move the needle slightly, but it could help us highlight some players to target. And I think when you look to the top, the team with the best schedule really becomes pretty interesting for me when I think of, who am I going to target at tight end. So that team at the top is the New York Football Giants. So that means Evan Engram. And I mean, really the benefit here, and as we're kind of consistently seeing throughout the series, if you face the NFC East, you're probably in a good situation. And obviously, if you're in the NFC East, you're facing a whole heck of a lot of the NFC East. So you have that. You have a favorable draw in week 4 against the Rams. The Rams, man, losing Corey Little, and that's a big deal for that team. You have the Bengals in week 12. Their defense is really suspect at this point. The Cardinals in week 14, and on paper, the Cardinals project to be a good matchup. I mean, Simmons is going to be the intangible for that defense and how he translates. The Browns in week 15, so a lot of nice matchups there. But I will say that the Ravens are in week 16 for Evan Engram. However, the point is pretty simple. When I look at ADP, so right now Travis Kelce going in the early second, Kittle's going in the late second. You have Mark Andrews going in the 4th, Ertz in the 4th, Waller in the 4th. Then you have to go all the way down to the 6th round for Henry and Higbee, and really right to the turn of the 7th round for Engram. Engram stands out as a really interesting target in that range. And I will tell you that this year, my approach is going to be as very similar to what it was last year. Passing up on the top guys, really not even going to be looking at that mini tier of Andrews and Ertz, and I guess you could throw Waller in there as well. Not going to be looking at them at their ADP. So that leaves, Higbee, yeah. I'm actually really impressed that his ADP has him all the way up as the number 7 tight end. So I may end up getting priced out of my guy. But Engram, there's obvious concerns because of the injuries, no doubt about it. But could you get him on the cheap? And I mean, you're talking about a guy who obviously the schedule is favorable, but a guy who has elite upside if he can stay on the field. We saw it in his rookie year, but the key is he hasn't been able to stay on the field the last couple years. So you're taking on that risk if you draft him at ADP. Speaking of Andrews, they have the second best schedule. When you're facing the Browns, you get the Bengals. That certainly helps the cause. Andrews going to be just fine. And if anything, Hayden Hurst out of the mix only further solidifies Andrews as a borderline elite option. He's right there, right on the cusp. I'm not willing to put him up in that Kelce Kittle tier, but every year we see guys who make the leap, to that next level, especially at tight end. Every year. So is this a year where Andrews, says, yep, I'm effing here. Last year wasn't a fluke. I think that could, his schedule's certainly not going to hurt him in that regard. The number 3 schedule goes to Washington. No, we're not running out and saying, I'm going to take a late round flyer on Jeremy Sprinkle. No, not going to do it. Sometimes good schedules get wasted. Dallas gets the number 4. So again, if you play in the NFC East, you're probably going to have a good schedule. Probably going to happen. So Dallas, Blake Jarwin is interesting. I mean, could you take him as a late-round flyer? I could see it. I don't think it's necessary, though. And I'm really going to view him more as a streamer. He's number 22 in ADP right now, and I think that's fair. I think that basically that positions him as on the outside looking in 12-team leagues, with your standard roster requirements. He's probably not getting drafted, and I think that's right. Would it be shocking if he finishes like number 15, 14, 13? No, not at all. But that's going to mean a whole lot of 3 for 32 and no touchdown games if that's the case. Then after that, Pittsburgh comes in at number 5. Ebron's going to be tricky because we know that Ebron has the potential to deliver some big fantasy performances. We saw it in 2018. But in Pittsburgh, I really think, first and foremost, the targets are going to go to those wideouts. Juju's going to get his, Johnson's going to get his, and whoever ends up being the third is probably Washington is going to get his. So is the tight end even third in the pecking order? Or is the tight end fourth in the pecking order? Not including the running backs, by the way. May end up being fourth, and then on top of it, you have Vance McDonald there. That kind of eats into Ebron. I think Ebron is going to be the ultimate boomer bust. Ebron is going to be a guy who, when the Steelers are facing the Bengals, I may stream if he's out there. He's not a guy who I'm going to be targeting in the draft or in fantasy drafts. And I think that makes sense. I mean, given his current ADP, he's the 19th tight end off the board. So, best ball, sure, get a piece of him at a value. But when it comes to regular season-long leagues, probably not looking at drafting him as a late-round guy. San Francisco gets the number 6 schedule, so not that Kittle needs it, but he gets it anyway. Then Cincinnati, that's another kind of waste because I'm not really buying in on Drew Sample taking a massive step forward. Jacksonville at 8, Eifert. Eifert was just hurt while listening to the pie. I know I've made that joke before. But Eifert, can you trust him? No, you can't trust him, even though it's a decent schedule. Then the Cleveland Browns at 9. So decent enough for Austin Hooper. There are some tough matchups in there. I mean, when you have to face the Baltimore Ravens, of course, that's going to be tough. So Hooper... Right now, Hooper is coming off the board as the number 10 tight end. And I think that makes sense just given where the tier drop kind of happens. So if you look at tight ends, Kelce and Kittle are their own tier. Then you have this sort of mini Andrews, Ertz, Waller tier. Then you have the like wheelhouse tier for me. And Henry's in that tier. Not that I'm targeting him this year, but I don't mind it if you get him at a value, by the way. But it's really Higbee and Engram who are, my targets. You have Gronk in the, he's the number 9 tight end in terms of his ADP, and that's actually right where I'm ranking him now. He's almost his own tier, and it's a big question mark tier for sure. But then after that, here's the names, and they all start to fall together for me. Hooper, Cook, Fant, Hurst, Goddard, Gesicki, Hawkinson. Hawkinson's pretty low in ADP. I'll talk about him in a minute, though. But it's almost like you could collapse those guys. And they have different things to offer, for sure. But you could all collapse those guys together as if you're going to wait, these are the guys that you're going to have at your disposal. And there's different appeal to each of them. In terms of Hooper, though, the concern that I have is the meat on the bone. Because we know Jarvis and Odell are going to get theirs. What about Njoku, the Joker? How much is the Joker going to be involved? That's the question. Now, I don't have an answer for you right now, but I've seen, basically I've every time I run projections, he comes in a little bit lower than where the public is on Hooper. But it's a nice schedule. Finally, number 10 goes to Philly, and yeah, if you play in the NFC East, you probably have a good schedule. So there you go. Let's go to the bottom 10 now. And at 23, we have Green Bay. Green Bay is interesting. Jay Sternberger in particular. I'm not willing to draft him, obviously, in regular leagues. I'm not even really willing to draft him in best balls. And in fact, right now, he's the number 29 in best ball ADP. So some people are drafting him, but I would suspect that, a lot of people aren't looking that direction even in the late rounds. He is a player, however, who, certainly for dynasty purposes, I'm going to be keeping my eye on. But just in general, could he take a step forward this year? I mean, really didn't have much of an opportunity to last year. But you have a big opportunity with no Jimmy Graham there. And the team obviously wanted to prioritize. I mean, they addressed the position in the draft. It is a priority for them. Sternberger could give you some of that production, though, that you're looking for in deep dynasty leagues, at least taking a step forward. I don't think he becomes fantasy relevant. We may have Jay Sternberger week, the whatever week that is. I couldn't tell you, but either way, I would love to see that. I just don't think that there's much there for fantasy purposes, at least out of the gate in 2020. Chargers at 24. So Hunter Henry, I'm not worried about this, though, for Hunter Henry. The bigger concern for Hunter Henry is when will Herbert be under center, because I just don't like the overall state of the passing game with Tyrod Taylor there. Miami at 25. I just hope that people look at the schedule, they say, oh, it's a tough schedule. I'm not going to take Mike Gesicki here. So that I can take him at a value. Right now, number 15 tight end off the board. I think Gesicki is poised to take a big leap forward. He already took a leap forward last year, but another big leap forward this year, and really cement himself as a top 12 guy. I think that happens this year, especially when Tua gets under center. Tough schedule, but I don't think it matters. Dude's a freak athlete. Not going to block, but I don't care. I'm not in a points per block league. I like Gesicki, and I hope this schedule scares some people off. Carolina at 26. So, sort of the opposite. The NFC South is the opposite of the NFC East. If you play in the NFC South, you're probably going to have a reasonably tough schedule. Same with the AFC East. You're probably going to have a reasonably tough schedule. But regardless, Ian Thomas, he's going as the number 21 tight end off the board, so another streamer type, not a guy you'd be looking at in regular season-long leagues as draftable. Chicago comes in at 27, Jimmy Graham, no thanks. Buffalo at 28, Dawson Knox, and by the way, Buffalo 28, so a little bit better than the other three positions, but we have to be last in something here for the Bills, unfortunately. The worst playoff schedule. They get the number 32 playoff schedule for tight ends. I don't think anybody is, that high necessarily on Dawson Knox here. But if you were, There you go. It's a pretty rough schedule for him. Moving on to Detroit, number 29 schedule. Hey, if you have to face the Vikings and the Packers, it's going to be tough. Those teams grade out really well in terms of their linebackers and coverage, their safeties and coverage. So it's just going to be tough. Hawkinson is fascinating for me. And here, like when you look at this, so you have to face the Packers twice. The Vikings, they get the Vikings in week 17 at least, so you don't face the Vikings twice. But you get the Saints, you get the Titans, you get Tampa. Those are tough matchups. So you get that, but then Hawkinson also has 7 top 12 matchups during the course of the season. So this could be a really bumpy ride. Like if we look back at the end of the season, we say, oh, TJ Hawkinson finished, 12th at the position in fantasy scoring. Awesome. But he could, like, that 12th could be comprised of, several top 5 finishes and then several finishes outside of the top 20. So it could be this roller coaster ride that ultimately ends up being very frustrating for fantasy purposes. Something to consider there with Hawkinson. Next on the list at number 30, the Las Vegas Raiders. I don't think it matters that much for Darren Waller. You do have to face Denver. You do have to face the NFC South. So, you're going up against New Orleans. You're going up against Tampa. Those are tough matchups. But he also has 5 top 12 matchups. He gets the Dolphins in week 16. Like, Darren Waller could be the number 1 tight end in the fantasy championship round. So it's not all bad. And for me, this is one of those classic instances here where I look at the schedule and I'm like, yeah, but I'm not really moving him. I'm not moving Darren Waller from where I have him. Now, I just told you I'm probably not drafting him in that range. So currently, like I said, he's going in the 4th round, late 4th round. Not really looking at a tight end in that range. But if I look down and Darren Waller is there at late 5th round, I may consider him. I'm not worried about the schedule. Likewise, the number 31 schedule for tight ends goes to the Kansas City Chiefs. Not worried about it. I said this yesterday on the show about Mahomes. I'll say it again about Travis Kelce. It doesn't matter. I don't care. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. He's. I think there's an argument to be made, and I know that people may look to Gronk or maybe even Gonzalez or Gates, early career Gates, as the best fantasy tight ends. Not best tight ends of all time. That's a different story. Different. It's a different conversation because you have to factor in things like blocking, etc. But fantasy, there's a very fair argument for Travis Kelce as the greatest fantasy tight end of all time. And it's really due to the high end, not only the high end production, but the high end consistency of production over the last several seasons here. Kelce has been off the charts from a consistency standpoint. And unlike somebody like Rob Gronkowski, who, hey, we always had that in our minds. If you drafted Gronk, you were like, yeah, but when's he going to get hurt? We don't say that about Kelce. We don't say that about him. And it especially helps when you have Patrick Mahomes throwing you the ball. And I'm not worried about the schedule whatsoever here for Travis Kelce. The worst schedule goes to the Atlanta Falcons. So it's interesting when you look at the general state of the position of tight end in the offseason. Hey, one of the players whose value increased the most at the position was Hayden Hurst, because he basically went from at best second fiddle to Mark Andrews to being essentially the guy on a team that just lost the guy in Austin Hooper. So great spot, but man, is this a tough schedule. You got to face the Saints. You got to face Tampa and the Saints. You got to face Minnesota. You got to face Denver. These are really tough matchups. So where I see this, Hayden Hurst right now is the number 13 tight end off the board in best ball ADP. That is pretty ambitious. I don't think, when you look at guys going after him, Dallas Goedert is 14. I would be seriously considering Dallas Goedert over Hayden Hurst. Mike Gesicki, I'm definitely taking Gesicki. You know that. I'm taking Gesicki ahead of Hayden Hurst. TJ Hawkinson, even though it's a tough schedule, he's at 16 in ADP. I'm taking him ahead of Hayden Hurst. Jack Doyle. He's at 17. I think that might be my cutoff. I don't think I would. I think I would still take a flyer on Hayden Hurst. After Doyle, you have in ADP Jonnu Smith, Eric Ebron, Ian Thomas, Blake Jarwin. Now we're down into that area. So I think that's about the cutoff. But right now, especially given the schedule, I think it might be better to view Hayden Hurst as if he's available, streamer, as opposed to a guy who we're going to be targeting as a late round tight end. Schedule moves the needle a little bit for me there. It's a tough schedule. There's no doubt about it. Schedule changes. We talked about that many times, but you at least have to account for it. So anyway, there you go. Get excited about tight ends there. Got a whole comprehensive review of my draft strategy and how schedule factors into that. So if you want this information, remember, PFF.com will give you the article write-up, the charts. You get it across all 4 positions. It's a really unique view of strength of schedule that you're not going to get anywhere else. So go check that out. Of course, you can also check me out on social media. That is at Jeff Ratcliffe on Twitter and Instagram. And I see you, Rat Packers. I always see you, Rat Packers. Hashtag Rat Pack, the way I know you listen to the pod. And that's a good thing. All right. I'm going to drink some IPAs tonight. Maybe a bourbon. And get relaxed for the weekend here. But we will be back with some fresh content for you on the other side of the weekend on Monday. So I will catch you then. For PFF, I'm Jeff Ratcliffe, and I'm out of here.